passing through. I can't forget the day we met. Your smile so bright, it made me swoon. Our love is like a summer's day, hot and endless in a magic way.
What is up, Soft Romano fans? This is Titus Nucci Anderson for the Soft Romano podcast. How are you guys doing out there? This weekend we're going to talk about flowcharts and privacy. So this weekend is going to be on your stratagem and on your gameplay again. We're not going to do any philosophy this time. I know that the guys like as much information as they can get on strategy, so you probably won't be disappointed by this one. First of all, I did want to apologize to you guys about some of the content that is on my Twitter feed lately. In the past, I had tried to keep my personal issues separated from my business platform at Soft Romano. And it worked for a little while, but it didn't work for very long, and now the two are kind of commingled together. So instead of just a straight informational as well as promotional social media platforms, it's kind of getting commingled with my personal issues. I wanted to apologize about that. The upside to it is that because of my situation, it really does lend to real fieldwork experience. It's not theoretical. I'm in a real situation. I'm in a real danger at all times. And so it's helped immeasurably as far as developing skill and developing expertise, so that it's coming from real world knowledge, and it seems to have helped out a lot of people out there. So one of the things that I had done recently is I had posted a flowchart that's at the top of the website on the homepage. And if it's not there when you go to look at the website, there will be a blog on it on flowcharts if you go to the blog page at softromano.com. And it basically charts my activities in trying to divest myself from a government project that I want no part of. So beginning in Phoenix around 2005, I started out by going to the police, and then from there to internal affairs, and from internal affairs to the FBI, and from the FBI to the Screen Actors Guild, and from the Screen Actors Guild to the Arizona Attorney General, from the Arizona Attorneys General to the governor in Arizona, from the governor in Arizona to the Arizona State Attorney General. From there it went to the United States Attorney General. From there it went to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And then I moved back here to Los Angeles, and the whole process started all over again. And that is charted out for you on the homepage. Essentially, that's what game theory is. It's just charting a path to a certain location and looking at the different routes that you have by which you can get there. If you have more than one route to get to your goal, then you can give each route a percentage or a probability of success. If one route has more obstacles than another, then you can chart that. You can also chart what the most likely responses are and things like that. So let me cover with you a few different types of charts that you can use in your gaming. The first one that you can use is what is called an influence chart. An influence chart is when you take a look at a person. You can pick any person at random in your apartment complex, in your company. Just pick anybody at random and ask yourself, where is that person in an organization? Who do they influence? And who do they take orders from? And who are they connected to? That would be an influence chart. The second type of chart that you may use in your gaming and in your intelligence work is what's called an organizational chart. That is to map out all of the different departments, all of the different department heads, and to map out their roles that they play with each other, and who has authority over whom within an organization. The third type of chart that you might use in your gaming is what is called a rate of change chart. That means that you are quantifying the percentages for some denomination of change for a person, a team, a territory, an asset, a resource, and charting how your depletion, utility, discovery of it, and so on, or acquisition of it, is changing over time compared to somebody else's. The fourth type of chart that you might be using is what is called a historical chart. Where do you come from? Who conquered who back then? Who was king of whatever at certain points of time, and who braided together with whom? Those are your historical charts, just basically history on a flow chart. The fifth type of chart that you might use is an informational chart. This is just a geographical map or a topographical map that you might see a company like Google using, so that you know where the restaurants are, you know where the streets are, you know where the electrical wiring in a house is, you know where the water pipes are, you know where the supply stations are in a territory, you know where the bases are in a baseball game, things like that. The next type of chart that you might run into is what is called a comparative chart. A comparative chart is a chart that tells me what I have versus what you have. How much do I weigh versus how much you weigh? How much in nuclear warheads do I have in the United States versus North Korea? How many does North Korea have versus Israel? How many does Israel have versus Russia? And things like that. The next type of flow chart that you might run into is what is called a heat map. A heat map is somewhere on a chart that has the most activity. It can be when you're PC gaming. PC games create heat maps where you see the most activity, but you could also see a heat map used in an apartment complex. Maybe everybody on the fourth floor is always talking, always partying, always busy. Or maybe the heat is always outside on the balcony. Maybe they're always outside talking on the balcony. Or maybe it's on the first floor. But that's an example of a heat map. If you're engaged in warfare, gaming, things like that, you may have a certain part of the field where there's a lot more activity. Certain people may attract more activity and things like that. So those are about 8 different examples of the different types of charts and maps that you can use in your gaming. So as you begin to accumulate this data, this is what's called your proprietary data, and data that is used for your own personal stratagem, whether it's used in an individual or used as a team, whatever it is. These are the things that you want to keep private, and that's what's going to lead us into our next category, which is called privacy. All right, now we're going to talk about something that is a little bit more serious. The first part of this video cast is pretty easy. It's about flowcharts, and there's about 8 different types of flowcharts that you can familiarize yourself with, experiment with, and use in different contexts and things like that. Second part of this video cast is about privacy. It has been said before that if you don't have encryption, you don't have an intelligence agency. And that if you have a field operative who is under surveillance, then you don't have a field operative anymore. So those are quotes taken from people who work in warfare. There are situations here in the city, may or may not be that serious. They could become that serious for some of us. It just depends on what you're doing. So I wanted to cover a few ideas with you on privacy. Privacy and security are not the same thing. Privacy is just the ability to conceal your person or your data or some possessions. Security is the ability to keep them safe from being stolen or sabotaged or terrorized or something like that. They overlap. If you have privacy, you probably have security, but they don't necessarily overlap. Okay, so I don't claim to be an expert in the area of privacy, but I will pass on some things that I have learned to you over so much time, and then the last couple of weeks were a little bit more intensive with research and looking to experts and people who work in this field on a full-time basis. There are a couple of blind spots that I think, I'm sorry about that. There are a couple of blind spots that I think come up again and again as they make these presentations about privacy. And here's what I was able to delineate. The first question you need to ask yourself is, who are you hiding from? And what are you trying to hide or to evade? Are you trying to evade the government, or are you trying to hide from police? Are you trying to hide from your ex-husband? Are you trying to hide from a hate group? Are you trying to hide from the competition? Are you trying to hide from advertisers or political activists? The way you answer that question makes all the difference in the world. The second question that you need to answer is, what are you trying to hide? Are you trying to hide your identity? Are you trying to hide your personal habits or your whereabouts? Are you trying to hide your contact lists? Are you trying to hide the content on your phone? Are you trying to hide the contents of your conversation? Depending on how you answer those two questions will determine how you should proceed from here and what you should be doing. In my opinion, this area of study could be totally nullified by the use of cybernetics. And that's something that you need to know up front. What is cybernetics? Roughly, cybernetics is the use of physics, electromagnetic waves, light, and so forth for the purposes of communication, surveillance, manipulation of the human body, and so forth. Some of the abilities that you have with cybernetics are the ability to eavesdrop, the ability to infiltrate almost any room that I know of, the ability to arrest people by the nervous system, the ability for brain-to-brain communication without any wires, the ability to superimpose imagery into another person's mind, the ability for them to manipulate your nervous system, including your heart rate, sweating, body temperature, arousal, sleepiness. They can even force you to have a bowel movement, urinate. They can force you to have sex or feel like having sex. There's a lot of things that can be done with cybernetics, and that's something that the government has available to them. That's another reason why people don't want to live in an ethno-state with ethno-cops, because that just means that a certain ethnicity is deputized and has this advantage or this margin of advantage over everybody else who is not deputized. And that would include the use of cybernetics and other police equipment. That means they can always eavesdrop on you no matter where you're hiding or what type of equipment that you're using. And that would nullify everything that you're studying. You don't know who's deputized, you don't know who's not deputized, and it's the equivalent of having a spy inside of every organization or every company if a certain ethnic group is deputized. If they're all Caucasian, if they're all African, if they're all Latino, and they're all deputized and you live in an ethno-state, then that's essentially what would happen. Okay, does that mean that you give up? No, it doesn't. All right. Some popular apps that you may have heard of are things like WhatsApp, Telegram, Proton Mail, Tutanota, and so forth. Proton Mail, which I use, and Tutanota are for emails. That's end-to-end encryption within their system. So if you send an email to me only using a Proton Mail account, not another account, then it should not be visible by anybody else, and it's encrypted. If you use something like Gmail or Google Drive or OneDrive, those emails can always be read by the people who work at Google. They can be read by other apps on your smartphones. They could be sold to other third parties and things like that. As far as apps on your phone, apps like WhatsApp and Telegram will be linked back to your own personal phone number. I will tell you, in my own personal opinion, if I were really engaged in some sort of intelligence work out here in the field, I wouldn't use WhatsApp or Telegram on a phone that I use for my regular telephone calls. So if you got a Samsung Galaxy at T-Mobile and you're using Signal on it or WhatsApp on it or Telegram on it, in my own personal opinion, you're wasting your time. It's not an encrypted conversation, and there's all sorts of spyware that can be put on those phones, even recording your voice, biometric software, and things like that. I'll cover another option for you here in a second. Okay, browsers. Browsers that you can use would be like Firefox Focus, Orbit, Orkut, Tor. I've used Tor and Orkut before. That can eliminate some tracking and some snooping. But what they don't tell you or answer is snooping by who? I mean, who are you avoiding? Are you trying to avoid the FBI or the CIA? Because most privacy experts will tell you if you're trying to avoid the NSA or the CIA, you can forget about it. You're not going to be able to avoid them if they really want you, or if you're really under their surveillance. It doesn't matter what type of equipment you're using. But it could eliminate some snooping by your competition, whether it's an ex-husband, competition across the street, another team, your brother-in-law, your family, advertisers. You may be able to eliminate some of those. Does that mean that if you're having a problem with the government that you shouldn't use Tor or Orkut? No, it doesn't. It just means that you take as many precautions as you can and you do the best job that you can, and whatever it eliminates, you just have to take your chances on that. Okay, privacy apps like Signal. Signal is supposed to be better than Telegram. I haven't tried Signal yet. I have used Telegram, but I don't have anybody to send messages to. I tried to get people to send messages to me over Proton Mail for information, but they don't want to send information to me over Proton Mail. They always want to stand around me and talk, but it would be smarter to set up a Proton Mail account and then send the information to me. The more apps that you have on your phone, the more spyware that you have. There are camera and microphone blockers that you may want to equip your phone with. And eliminating cookies does not mean that you're eliminating the footprint that you leave as you go surfing the internet. What Google and Apple have done is they have created a separate tracking device called Google ID and Apple ID, which means that even if you turn off the cookies on your browsers, that there's still another tracking mechanism on your phone and on your browser window that is communicating back to them every website that you're looking at. If you're really going to pursue this because you're engaged in some type of intelligence work, then you would probably want to get a non-stock Android phone, like a Linux phone or something like that. Some of these people advise that after you get that type of phone, that you should download these apps like Lineage or Graphene OS are non-stock Android phones. That means like it's not a Galaxy. So Lineage or Graphene OS is supposed to be a very good Android phone. After you do that, then you're supposed to download F-Droid or Aurora so that you can use some of the apps in the Google Play Store. That doesn't make any sense. The apps have spyware on them, and they don't have to be able to take your picture or link it back to your phone number in order for them to accumulate enough data about you to recognize who you are. If you use that phone for anything else, and if it's connected to any cell towers, your location can be triangulated. So it wouldn't be difficult for them to figure out who's using the phone and where you are and start the whole process over again. In my own personal opinion, you shouldn't be downloading apps and using them on that phone if you're really using it for intelligence purposes, or if you're really trying to evade a very serious threat. Okay, so what are we supposed to do? What some people recommend that you do is that you now go get a burner phone, like from T-Mobile or Mint Mobile, and then you get the SIM card, you get a valid phone number, you get the ID, and then you can start using the apps again. I don't agree with that pathway doing that. What I would do personally is I would buy a phone that has been used by somebody that was bought at a department store like Walgreens or something like that, that has a call history on it, that has a history of contact lists on it and so forth, and I would take over the payments from that person, and then I would just maintain it on a monthly basis, and then that's the phone that I would use, and I would cover the camera and so forth. As you carry those phones around, there's a Faraday bag that you can put the phone in that blocks all signals coming to the phone or going out of it, or you can just remove the battery from the back of the phone. That always works, so that way it's not being tracked. Remember that as soon as you reconnect the phone to a cell tower or start using it, your position can be triangulated, and that means if the police or the FBI is looking for you, they will know where you are very quickly as soon as you plug in the phone. So again, it's important to set these things up in advance, and it's important to be realistic about evading surveillance. It comes down to those first two questions: who are you trying to hide from? And number two, what are you trying to hide? Are you trying to hide yourself, or your company's proprietary data, or your contact lists, and things like that? Okay, next we have storage. For storage, the safest thing that you can use is your own personal USB drives. That's the best thing. But if you're not going to store it on your USB drives, then you want to take a look at companies like Nextcloud, SpiderOak, and Tesseract. If you're using OneDrive or Google Drive, it's not safe. There's tons of companies who can see what you have when you store those things there. There's Veracrypt and Cryptomator to encrypt before uploading. So that way you can encrypt the data and then upload it to a cloud service. That way anybody downloading it or trying to view it would not be able to do so. All right. Next, we move on to mesh and peer-to-peer networks. A peer-to-peer network is a system that most closely resembles CB radios. So it just means that I have the ability to make a phone call to you from my phone to your phone, but the call doesn't get routed through a cellular tower. It just goes directly from one phone to the other. That's called a peer-to-peer network. If you want to, you can experiment with an app called Bromite, B-R-O-M-I-T-E, that'll turn a regular smartphone into a peer-to-peer phone. Again, you have to use caution. Don't use it on a phone that you make monthly payments on with your regular phone number and call history if you're trying to hide yourself. If you're trying to hide the contents of your conversation, then you're probably okay. But again, I would use a third-party phone. So you got to get clear on what it is that you're trying to hide. Are you trying to hide what you're trying to hide, and who you're trying to hide from will determine which applications and which devices to use. In closing, I will tell you that I would never buy a de-Googled phone and then download Aurora or F-Droid onto the phone. I would buy a phone from a second party and I would tell you that I wouldn't carry the two phones together with each other because of the ability for the authorities to triangulate your location. Even amateur hackers can triangulate your location. The other thing I would tell you is that if you're going to use these apps, another layer of security that you can use is to learn how to set up a language or an encryption before you start talking on the phone. That means codes, a special language, references. Those things need to be set up in advance before you ever start trying to talk to each other over the phone without giving away what you're talking about. And last but not least, you might want to consider using the mail. The mail may not be very sexy and it may not get there very fast, but if the message is encrypted that you write down or type out and then mail, you may be able to evade who sent the letter and what the contents of that letter are to any third parties, assuming that your recipient gets it and it's seen by somebody else. So that's a way to sidestep all of those things. So I hope that helps you out. Believe it or not, the information that is gathered from your smartphones and your call histories and your call data is nothing more than an example of a flow chart, a relationship chart, an influence chart, purchases in your history chart, and from that people can extrapolate who you are, what you're most likely to do, who you know, if you're dangerous, how much money you have, and things like that. You know who's become very, very wealthy doing that? It's Google. Google has become very wealthy accumulating that data and automating that data and selling it to third parties so that way they can sell you products, so they can track you, whether it's for marketing, advertising, or for governmental purposes. So never overlook or think that the information that you can glean from using charts and so forth isn't valuable. It can be very valuable. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us this week. I hope you had fun. I'll try to keep it to about 30 minutes and give you something that you can work on over the weekend. If you're looking for things to do with your family or with yourself and you don't want to watch TV or movies or the news and things like that, which I strongly recommend that you avoid, except once in a while for entertainment purposes, of course, then learn how something works, learn how to take it apart, learn how to fix it, learn how to improve on it, learn how to play with it or develop some facility with it. How good are you at using it? Where else can it be used? How do you compare it using it with other people? So those are some ideas for you the next time that you're bored. All right, stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.